Hello and welcome back to On the Grid Podcast, Season 5, Episode 7. And, at the time of recording, it is a week until the Australian Grand Prix. Join with me as ever is Adrian Keita. You excited for the first race of the season?
Yeah, I'm buzzing. I can't wait for action to be finally the first race of the season to be finally upon us. Whilst the listeners will maybe listening this to, I think on the Tuesday, I think this episode will be released, or on the Wednesday. We'll be we'll be edging closer and closer to the start of a brand new season. So I'm looking forward to the season getting underway and yeah, finally seeing what 2025 F1 is all about.
Absolutely. We've got a few things to cover before we kick off in Melbourne. And one of those things being our 2025 driver predictions from 1 to 20. I think there's a lot of speculation there might be more than 20 drivers. I know there's the last 2 years there's been more than 20. I think we're going to stick to just 20 for argument's sake. And I think this is the big predictions one. I think you've won it the last 2 years, so I'm looking to get my crown back and have a good year this year. So without further ado, do you want to give me your P20?
Oh, you want me to start? Okay,
Yeah,
great.
yeah, you start. You start.
So I'll give you my P20 and P19 because they're two drivers from the same team. So I've gone with Gabby Bortoleto in 20th and Nico Hulkenberg in 19th. I think the Sauber is going to be very much the same as what we saw last season, very much a tractor. And I think what Sauber are looking forward to is when they actually partner up, well, when they actually become Audi next year. And I think that's when Sauber slash Audi is actually going to take off. But I see much of the same for Sauber in 2025. Don't get me wrong, they had spells at the back end of 24 where they looked like they could compete for points, but I just don't see it happening. I really don't. I don't see it happening, and I see the two Sauber drivers struggling to get any points. So yeah, I've gone with Hulkenberg in 19th and Gabby Bortoleto in 20th.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that sentiment. I do think they're going to be closer to the back of the field. I don't think it's going to be as bad as last season. I think they've got an upgrade with both of their drivers as well. I do think Bortoleto is better than Zhou and Hulkenberg is better than Bottas. But I've gone for Bortoleto again in P20. Just I think the rookie season, there's not much expectation this season for Sauber. I don't think. I think next season is where it really starts to get interesting for them when obviously Audi take over, and then that's when you have a little bit more of an expectation on them. For P19, I've gone for Jack Doohan. So I've gone for Jack Doohan to sandwich the Saubers because I've gone for Nico Hulkenberg in P18. I don't think Jack Doohan's going to race the entire season. I think there's a lot of talk, even looking at sort of Drive to Survive where the way that Flavio Briatore is speaking about him, saying, "I own you every single percent." It very much is made out as if Jack Doohan is a stopgap. Obviously, Franco Colapinto's in the reserve role on a 5-year contract. You don't put someone on a 5-year contract if you don't have the intention of having them race for you. So it might be next season. It might be this season, but I can't see Jack Doohan racking up enough points to get him higher up this list before he is replaced. And like I said, P18, I've gone for Hulkenberg, exactly what I said for Bortoleto, but I do think Hulkenberg will be able to get maybe a P9, P10 on a semi-frequent basis for Sauber. So what about your P18?
So for my P18, obviously. You sandwich Jack doing between the two Sauber drivers. I've actually put him ahead of the two Sauber drivers. I put him in 18th. Same real reason that you kind of said for Jack doing. I don't see him racing for the full season. And I think with a clip that I saw that F1 posted about Jack doing and kind of Carlos Sainz, because Carlos Sainz did have a phone call with Flavio Briatore regarding that Alpine seat. So it could have actually been Carlos Sainz instead of Jack doing at Alpine. Um, But like you mentioned, Franco Colapinto's there on a 5-year deal. I don't see Franco just sitting on the sidelines waiting for his opportunity. I think his opportunity is going to arrive this season, and I think he'll be a mid-season driver swap with Jack Doohan departing the team and Franco Colapinto coming into the team mid-season. Um, how I think it will affect Jack Doohan, knowing that his opportunities are potentially limited. I think, especially when you head into a rookie season like a driver like Jack Doohan is right now, it's it's only going to have it's only going to put a lot of pressure on him, a lot of pressure on very young shoulders, and I think that what Alpine have done, even though they've given him the drive just solely because they kind of had no choice. And then they're kind of sort of doing a U-turn. It's a little bit harsh on Jack Doohan, but unfortunately, that's the way the cookie crumbles in Formula One. It's a very fast-moving sport, and if Jack Doohan doesn't perform to the right levels that he needs to in order for him to keep his seat, it's unfortunately a revolving door in Formula One. So I don't see him racing the full season, and I don't see him racking up enough points for him to even keep his seat, which is why I put him in 18th, just above the two Sauber drivers.
Yeah, moving on to 17th for me, I've gone for Isaac Hadjar. I don't think RB are going to be as strong as they were last season. I think they're going to improve as the season goes on, but testing wasn't positive for them. I think they were very much ninth, just ahead of Sauber, but way off the rest. So I think they'll take that with a pinch of salt, but I think it's going to be difficult for Hadjar. Obviously, coming up against somebody like Yuki Tsunoda. I do think he could struggle slightly. He's obviously a very talented driver, pushed Bortoleto right to the end in F2 last season. But I think I've got him in 17th. I think it's going to be a difficult one. And like I said, I don't think the RB is going to be as quick as last season.
Yeah, and I'm inclined to agree with you on this one as well. I've also gone with Isaac Hadjar in 17th. It was really a big toss up between him and Ollie Bearman for 17th because from what I saw in preseason testing, oh yeah, preseason testing shouldn't get too, shouldn't really look too much into it, but the two Hasses were just completely way off it. And if you are a new F1 fan that looks straight into preseason testing, thinking this is what's going to happen throughout the whole season, you could argue that Haas should be way near the bottom. But I've gone with Isaac Hadjar in the 17th. I just don't think he's going to have that quality to match Yuki Tsunoda. I think Yuki's going to have a successful season. Don't get me wrong. I think yet again we're in a situation that we're saying it's a make or break season for Yuki Tsunoda, and it is in a sense because he's still looking to get that race seat elsewhere in a better team. And I think this season for Yuki Tsunoda will be a very, very good one. But Isaac Hadjar is going to be off the pace. But I don't think it'll matter too much for Isaac Hadjar. I think his seat is sort of it's not in the balance, but I see him as a very talented driver, and I see him on the grid for 2026. So there's not a lot of pressure on Isaac Hadjar, similarly to Gabriel Bortoleto and Kimi Antonelli, for example. Jack Doohan's in a completely different boat, but I don't see Isaac Hadjar having an amazing season. I do see him finishing in the points here and there, but I think that he's going to be well off Yuki Tsunoda's pace, and I think Yuki Tsunoda will outclass him. That's for sure.
Yeah, I agree with that sentiment. And speaking of Ollie Bearman, I've gone for him in 16th. I think it's going to be a positive first season in Formula One for him. However, I just can't see him finishing too much higher. I think he'll be able to take the fight to Ocon in several races, but I think over the course of the season, that's when you see Ocon's experience that will start to shine through a little bit. There might be some races where he's slightly off the pace. Obviously, a very talented driver, but I just can't see him finishing above some of the drivers got ahead of him.
Yeah, so I'll group the two Haas drivers because I've got them up in 16th and 15th. I've got Ocon in 15th and Behrman in 16th. Pretty much exactly what you said. I see Ocon kind of been the leading light for Haas this season. And Ollie Behrman's going to obviously do his utmost best to be able to compete with him. But I just see Ocon being a little bit too much for Behrman and him just edging it out ever so slightly, maybe by a point or two. Um, both of them, it depends. It depends whether they clash on track. That's the only thing that I'm thinking. I did say whenever we spoke about the driver pairings, but I think Ocon will be heading into this partnership with Ollie Behrman with a greater understanding of what's at stake because he's got a rookie teammate that he kind of needs to help and hone into the sport. And he's kind of got to lead by example in a sense. And I think it will benefit Ocon having a teammate like Behrman because Behrman will be able to push him all the way, I feel. Such a talent. And we saw it in the three races that he did in 2024 that Behrman has every capability of becoming a top Formula One driver. So I do see the two Haas drivers kind of pushing each other in 2025, but I think Ocon's going to just edge it out ever so slightly.
In 15th place, I've gone for Yuki Tsunoda. Similar sentiment to Isaac Hadjar. Now, this is one I can see being a bit off it. This is one I do worry about come the end of the season. So I'm not entirely happy with my predictions at the minute, but I think this is I kind of haven't had a chance to really finalize them and get to a point where I am happy with it. So I'm going with Yuki Tsunoda in 15th. But like I said, this could bite me come the end of the season. Similar sentiment to Hadjar, as I said. I think the RB will be slightly slower than it was last season, and it might struggle. And then if that's the case, then there's going to be limited opportunities to get to points because I think same as last season, essentially the bottom six teams are fighting for two positions. I know Aston Martin has dropped off the pace a little bit, so I don't think they're necessarily going to finish ninth and 10th every race. But I do think there's opportunities for points, but it's just for the lower ends only. So I've gone for Yuki Tsunoda. I think he'll be a bit disappointed as well, having not been promoted to the Red Bull team this season.
So one place higher, I've put Yuki Tsunoda in 19, 18, 17, 16, 15, 14th. I've put him in 14th. And you know, I'm in a kind of similar predicament like that you are in because I do see Tsunoda having a good season. Whether he'll be on the brink of a top 10, I don't think he will. I think he'll just be off it. But I think it's sort of a big season for Yuki Tsunoda, like I mentioned, but he kind of needs to get every inch and it's pretty much got to be inch perfect for Yuki Tsunoda this season, if he is to make it up to a better team than RB because even Helmut Marko's on his case, even Christian Horner's on his case. It's his I believe it's his fifth season now in F1. And for him to still be in the sister Red Bull team and not even been given a shot at the top job at Red Bull is very criminal. I don't get me wrong, Liam Lawson's fantastic, but I think Yuki Tsunoda deserves it way more than he does. And it's hard to kind of put a finger on what's going to happen with Yuki Tsunoda this season because we've seen kind of a little bit of inconsistency. We've seen Yuki Tsunoda at his best at some points in 2024. We've seen him at his worst. So I've put him down in 14th. I see him having some very good races in 2025, but whether that will be enough for him to attract a better drive elsewhere, I don't know. But I've put him down in 14th, and I think this one may bite me back in the back very quickly because I think he has the capabilities of finishing a lot higher up.
Moving on to 14th place for myself, I've gone for Lance Stroll. Like I said, I don't think the Aston Martin is going to be as strong, and they're not going to have that early season form that they had last year to fall back on, sort of give them that boost. I think Lance Stroll finished around about 13th, 14th last season, so I can see the same happening again. I think, I could say a lot here, but I'm going to keep it short and sweet, is that he's way off of the level of Fernando Alonso. And I think that's going to be reflected in the driver standings. Like I said, they're going to be in the midfield, and when there's only limited opportunities for points, can he be trusted to deliver on a consistent basis? I don't believe so. So that's why I've gone for him in 14th.
Onto my 13th place, I think it is. I have gone with Alex Albon in 13th. Um, it's hard with all these teams in the lower midfield, and it's I do see Williams having a better season than they did in 24. But again, I feel like they are very much focusing themselves on what is going to happen in 2026. And I don't think they're putting I don't think they're putting many eggs in the basket for 2025. With that being said, I think Alex sort of, I don't think he had a subpar season last year, but it's definitely not one to his like capabilities and his high standards. And I think it's sort of reflected in our 2024 season predictions where we had him up very, very high and look what happened. It was kind of a little bit of a mismatch. And I think I'm not gonna chuck him into the top 10, for example, but I do see him having a good enough season where he's finishing in the points on a few occasions. So I've put him in 13th, and I'm hoping that he sort of delivers the goods for me this season.
My 13th place is also Alex Albon. I do agree. I do agree with what you said about his last season. I think it was disappointing, maybe not underperforming. But it's a difficult one because I think they've got one of the strongest driver lineups on the grid, but I don't know how good the car is going to be. So maybe I've been a bit over ambitious with the pair of them. And they could be a little bit lower, but their testing form looked good. And I think the standard that Carlos Sainz will bring to the team will elevate everybody, bring some motivation to the team, and it'll be a really positive effect on them. So I've gone for Albon in 13th. But again, that's one I'm not too sure about. I could see him finishing slightly lower, possibly.
On to 12th, and I've gone with Pierre Gasly in 12th. It's hard with Alpine once again because we kind of saw what happened at the start of the 2024 season, and that's kind of what is making it hard for me and hard for me to comprehend and kind of gauge where I can put Alpine because from what we saw at the start of last season, it was tragic. But what we saw at the back end of last season is just giving Alpine a world of confidence and showing that they can fight and they can fight to get podiums and to be on brink of victories. But I've not got too ahead of myself. I've kept level-headed with it, just about level-headed with it. I've kept him out of the top 10 just and placed him in 12th. But again, I think because he's sort of shortened his hair and kind of shaved his head, if you want to say, he's going to have that fighting style, that fighting um ability is going to be instilled in him, and I think he's going to have a good season regardless of what happens at Alpine because he's clearly shown by that haircut that this season he's going to be a fighter and not a pushover, if you want to say that.
My 12th place is Esteban Ocon. I think there'd be a bit of a gap between him and Iban over the course of the season. But maybe I've it's exaggerated slightly in my ratings. I think it could be just a few points really. I think that Haas looked to be making sort of steady improvements from last season. I think they're moving in the right direction as a team under Ayu Komatsu. And I think this next few years could be a really exciting time for Haas. So we'll wait to see what happens in terms of that. But I think they ended the season quite strong. They had a very, very strong 2024 season. So let's see what happens with them. But I've gone for Esteban Ocon in 12th position.
Onto my 11th place, and I have gone with Lance Stroll in 11th. I think that the addition of Adrian Newey. Okay, it's not going to be an instant fix for Aston Martin, but I think his addition alone is going to bring a lot of confidence into the team. Yes, we did see them falling away as the season went on in 2024, but I do see them having a very, very good season. And obviously, with a rookie like Fernando Alonso, anything can happen. Um, you see, I use the word rookie because he's very young. Um, but Lance, on this podcast, we do have a slight hatred towards the guy. We'll admit it. There is a slight hatred towards the guy. But I think this season he'll learn from the mistakes of the last couple of seasons. And it does pain me to say that because Lance Stroll is not like top tier F1 drivers. If you're talking about if you're even having a Formula One conversation with your mates, for example. And he's certainly one of them that is never entering that conversation. But again, I do think he'll make amends from the last couple of seasons. I do see him having a good season, but then again, I think he'll just be outside the top 10 and on the brink of it. So I've put him in P11.
And my P11 is Pierre Gasly. I think this is going to be a very I think Alpine are going to have an exciting season. I think they did move forwards certainly towards the end of last season. Finally figured out their car in the last few races. Got the double podium in Brazil, obviously. I think Gasly could be one that springs a few surprises and can compete for the higher points on several occasions. This is one that could spring a surprise, like I said. I think that he'll have the beating of Jack Doohan quite comprehensively. Whether he will about Franco Colapinto if he ever steps into the car, we'll have to wait and see. But yeah, you mentioned about his new haircut, his coming out fighting.
Yeah, I had to mention his haircut because I actually incidentally, you know the pictures of the return back to school sort of thing. I saw his picture and his name on his board as not Pierre Gasly as Pedro Gasly. I think it said Pedro, not Pierre, if I'm not mistaken. And I was thinking, okay, this Pierre Gasly is either going to be a very comedic one in 2025 or he's going to be in it to win it. And I think he's going to be in it to win it. On to P10. I've got Carlos Sainz finishing 10th. Yeah, again, am I overhyping Carlos Sainz? From sort of what's happened in pre-season and what he could bring to Williams potentially. We obviously saw him top day two testing in Bahrain. And it's another difficult one because this driver is very close to my heart after spending so many seasons at Ferrari, and I do really wish him the best so he can have a successful season at Williams. Yeah, I've stuck him with 10th. I don't want to put him any higher because this is another one that could seriously come back and bite me. Um, yeah, it's hard. I'm not gonna go into much more detail because I think Carlos has hit the ground running at Williams, but I do see him kind of finishing anywhere between 10th and maybe 13th, depending on how the Williams car is throughout a whole season. But I've stuck him in 10th and I'm hoping that he does find himself in the top 10 come the end of the season.
Yep, no, I agree. I've gone for Carlos Sainz in P10 as well. Like I said for Axel, but I think this could be one where I'm maybe being a bit over ambitious because I've got a feeling that Williams are really going to put all their eggs in 2026's basket and not really care too much about this year's results. But we'll have to wait and see. I think Sainz is a top driver. I can't believe he's not in a big seat fighting for race wins and podiums on a week by week basis. But here we are. Um, yeah, I think he'll do brilliantly at Williams. He already seems to be settling in nicely. So yeah, that's where I think Carlos Sainz will finish this season.
On to my P9, and I do have Fernando Alonso yet again having another top 10 finish in the Drivers' Championship for another season. It's similar to what I said about Lance Stroll. I think the addition of Adrian Newey, especially with a Fernando Alonso that's raring to go and fighting as the young driver he is, I think that it will only boost Aston Martin's stock and will boost their two drivers on a whole different level. Um, Obviously, Aston are sort of a very, very much yo-yo team. They're an up and down team. It's you don't know what will happen one race to another race. It's very unpredictable with their two drivers and their car. But I still see Fernando having a very successful season, and I see him performing very well in all the races this season. So I've put him in ninth. I think it's just going to be another season of sort of consistency for Fernando, and I think he'll beat Lance Stroll kind of comprehensively again.
Yeah, I completely agree. I've also got Fernando Alonso in ninth place. Again, like we said at the end of the last season, I think Alonso's points total from the first five races, I think it was enough to beat Stroll over the course of last season. So that just goes to show how well he performed in comparison. And I think it'd be similar. I don't think he'll have as higher highs as he did for last season, but I think that he'll continue to show what he's about. And nobody's going to be able to doubt his quality. So yeah, it'll be. Let's see what he does. Hopefully the Aston Martin can take strides forward because it's always fun to see Alonso fighting in the higher positions. But we'll have to wait and see.
On to the top four teams now. And in eighth, I've gone with Kimi Antonelli. I think that yeah, again, it's a similar situation to what I mentioned about Behrman, Hajar, and Bortoleto. It's very much pressure off Kimi at this season, that's for sure. I don't think there's any pressure on his young shoulders, and I think he's a very exciting driver with a lot of raw talent. And I think that this season he'll just need to get used to having such a powerful machine that is the Mercedes car. I do obviously again I'm gonna go back to preseason testing. I think he did a fantastic job in the 3 days that we had preseason testing. And he is a driver that is very, very exciting, but I just don't see him pushing any higher than eighth. I think that Kimi, like I mentioned, is sort of having this season to just acclimatize himself into the sport, have the pressure off, and sort of, just get as many points on the board as possible. Use this as a stepping stone into the seasons to come because I'm guarantee you he's here to stay for a very, very long time. But I think this season he'll just have to figure out what he can and can't do, sort of the limits of a car, and how he can just progress forwards rather than looking backwards. So Kimi Antonelli in eighth, he will still have a good season. I think he may even get himself on the podium once or twice, but I just think that he won't have enough to make a push any higher up.
Yeah, agreed. Gone for Kimi Antonelli as well. I think he's going to be able to. I think he's got the raw speed to take it to Russell on a regular basis. But again, like we said for Behrman and Bortoleto and the likes, I don't know if he can do it over the course of a season yet. I think it's going to be difficult to do it over such a long time period against someone like George Russell, being as sort of consistent as he has been over the last few years. But I think he can definitely do something, and he can definitely challenge him. And I think Antonelli will have a couple of podiums this season. I do. So yeah, we'll see what happens. But Antonelli in eighth, because I think that he might get found out over the course of the season. But it's his first season with a top team. And you'd expect that with some of the drivers that are above him.
On to P7, and I've got Liam Lawson in seventh. I think Red Bull, even Max has probably gone on record and said that Red Bull aren't going to be as strong this season compared to the Ferrari and the McLaren and maybe even the Mercedes. Um, and Liam, it's a tricky one for Liam Lawson because he's gone into a Red Bull team on a how can I put it lightly? He's just jumped into the team ahead of Yuki Tsunoda in a bit of an unfair fashion because I think if I was to have Yuki Tsunoda in Red Bull, I'd have him a lot higher up than seventh. I actually would. But because it's Liam Lawson and again, it's sort of his first season in a top team, I do see him kind of having not as many woes, but I do see him having a sort of season that Kimi Antonelli is will be having. But then again, the pressure that Liam Lawson will have on his shoulders will be greater than the pressure that Kimi Antonelli will be having. Um, Again, I think Liam Lawson will have a good season. He's proven that he's a very, very good driver. But again, I just don't see him reaching, the top five and the top six sort of drivers that are ahead of him. So yeah, Liam Lawson in seventh will have a good season, but not reaching maybe the heights that many people are anticipating him having.
Yeah, we'll continue to agree. I've also gone for Liam Lawson in seventh, and I agree with what you said. I think he'll be able to take the fight to Verstappen more than Perez was able to. But I think he's not going in there. They're not expecting him to go in there and beat Max Verstappen, who's won the last four world championships in a row. So he'll be closer. He'll be a lot closer. But whether he's able to take the fight to Verstappen every single race, I don't think so. So I've gone for seventh. I think he'll have the beating of Antonelli, but struggle to beat the six ahead, especially because I don't think the Red Bull could end up being the fourth quickest car when we get to Melbourne next week.
On to sixth, and just on the brink of the top five, I've gone with George Russell. I think that, don't get me wrong, George is a fantastic driver. But I think the five ahead of him are that little bit better, that inch better. And obviously, I think Mercedes will come out fighting in 2025, but I don't see George having, the sort of seasons that the top five will have. The five drivers ahead of him will be having. I think it all depends on how Red Bull perform really, because Max Verstappen could be first, could be second, or he could even finish sixth or seventh in the championship. It really depends on what sort of season Red Bull have. I've gone with a level head when it comes to Red Bull, and I've placed him quite high. Well, I wouldn't say high up, but he's high enough up to be within the top five. That's why George Russell just misses out on the top five and kind of sits in sixth. But again, I think this will be another season where we'll see numerous race winners from numerous teams, and I think George Russell will be one of them. But I think he'll miss out on the top five by maybe a handful of points. But yeah, I placed George Russell in sixth.
Well, we continue to agree. I've also gone for George Russell in sixth place. I think this is so far it's been fairly straightforward to do from around sixth to ninth, roughly. I think it's when we get to the places above that is going to be a little bit more difficult. But yeah, George Russell is obviously an excellent driver, and he'll get another race win or two this season. I have no doubt about that. Whether he can take the fight to the other teams and maybe even challenge for the title, who knows? I think he's going to be slightly off it there. I don't think the Mercedes is going to be that quick. I think from everything I've read and heard is that the Mercedes is a fairly straightforward design, and it should be quick towards the start of the season. But as the other teams start to understand their car a bit more, they'll also have more areas to develop into, if that makes sense. So the Mercedes might be quicker for the start of the season, but the ceiling of their pace isn't as high as maybe some of the other cars. So that's why I've gone for George Russell in sixth. But it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. So moving on then to fifth place, and I've gone for Max Verstappen in fifth place. I think the two teams above them are going to be very far clear. However, again, this is one I'm not 100% confident on because I think Verstappen could easily finish second or third. So I'm a little bit concerned about this one. I do think Red Bull are going to struggle this season. I don't think Verstappen wins this year's championship because I think there's two teams that are quicker. But I think that Verstappen will win many races still this season, and continue to deliver at a level which is sort of unparalleled on the grid. Yeah, so I'm not happy with this with fifth place for him, but I've gone for it anyway because I think the two teams above him are going to be stronger.
On to my fifth place. I've gone with Oscar Piastri. And I think I hear what you're saying with Max Verstappen. But again, the Max Verstappen effect, I think, will be in full state flow. Don't get me wrong, I've not put Max Verstappen much higher in my top five. Um, but I think Oscar Piastri will just miss out on the top four. And I do see him still having a good season, but I think there might be a few little bumps in the road for Oscar Piastri, especially with his inter-team battle with Lando Norris. I think both of those drivers at McLaren are seen as number ones, and I think the battle will kind of spiral out a little bit, and I do see Oscar Piastri coming out worse in that battle. And I don't know whether that would mean Oscar Piastri could be on the move elsewhere into heading into another season. But I do see that inter-team battle between Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri being swayed more in Lando Norris's favour. So I've gone with Oscar Piastri in fifth. Um, and I think he's still going to have a good season, but I don't think he's going to have as good as a season that he did last season. That's for sure.
Fourth, I've gone for Oscar Piastri. Now, I did have those two the other way around actually for a long time, but I changed it. I agree. I think that Norris is obviously going to be the one that is favoured for the championship. But you know, if Piastri starts the season well, there's no reason why he can't have a claim for it. But I do think that against Norris's experience and whatnot, he could struggle slightly. But we'll see what happens with that. I think that would be a very, very interesting inter-team battle, as it was last season as well. But yeah, I've gone for Piastri in fourth. However, I do expect them to have the strongest car, so maybe that could change.
I've just done a late swap. And for my fourth place, I've actually gone for Lewis Hamilton. Um, I was just looking whilst you were talking about Oscar Piastri. And I was thinking my guts going to put Max Verstappen a little one higher up. I did have him initially in fourth, but I may as well go with my third place as well. I have Max Verstappen in third. I do see Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton being separated by a matter of points when it comes to the final standings, but I do see Max Verstappen edging it out and claiming a place in the top three. Um, I think I think for Lewis Hamilton, it's similar to the one of the rookie drivers. I don't think mm, there's massive amounts of pressure on his shoulders to deliver, and I think even he himself will be hoping that 2026 is the season where he can really hit the ground running after a solid season in 2025 for Ferrari and deliver a championship for the Scuderia in 2026. Don't get me wrong, I won't be disappointed if he delivers a championship in 2025, but I do see this season as sort of him getting used to the machinery and getting really stuck in and kind of just acclimatizing himself in the team. I don't think he'll hit the ground running straight away. He's going to be, I think, quite a bit off shoulder clud to begin with. But as the season progresses, I think he's just going to build up and build up and build up and sort of get himself as close to Leclerc as possible. But I do see him finishing just outside the top three with Max Verstappen taking third. talking about Verstappen. I think, like I mentioned, I think the Verstappen effect will still be in play. And I really do see him having a good season, even though Red Bull may not be the top team that they used to be. But I do see Verstappen absolutely outperforming that car, and putting it on the podium numerous amount of times and getting numerous victories. But I do see him missing out on the top two battle by a little bit.
In third place, yeah, as much as I don't want to say it, I'd like to put him two places higher. I've got Lewis Hamilton. I think this is going to be very intriguing between him and Leclerc. I don't think there'll be much in it at all. Um, but I have gone for Leclerc to edge it. I really want to say the eighth world title is coming this season. However, I think I might have to push that back. I do think he'll be on the top step again. I think there'll be a few race wins and several podiums to add to his already massive collection. And I think that he is going to be able to take the fight. Maybe he could be in a championship battle, which would be fantastic. We'll have to wait and see on that one, but I think he's got the edge on the drivers below him. I think because the Ferrari does look very very strong, maybe not as strong as one of the other car, but I do think it'll be thereabouts.
On to my second place, and it's obviously a toss-up between Leclerc and Norris. And you know, I've got my bias hat on. I've gone with Lando Norris in second. And I think this this championship battle between I'm putting Verstappen in it as well, between Verstappen, Norris, and Leclerc won't be like any before because Verstappen is likely to come out on the bottom step of that podium. And Norris will be battling with Leclerc for that championship crown. Yeah, I do see Lando Norris having yet again another successful season, but I think that like I mentioned, this championship battle won't be like any before because when obviously Max Verstappen was fighting with Lewis Hamilton, it was obviously the sort of the prodigy, the upcoming top dog, fighting against a seven-time world champion. When Leclerc fought against Verstappen, it was a prodigy looking to be a champion fighting against a world champion. And when Lando Norris did it, it was a prodigy wanting to becoming a world champion fighting against a multiple time world champion. This one, it's two drivers wanting to become world champion, and that it will. I think there'll be many blows in this season in 2025, but I do see Lando Norris missing out by just that little bit, and of course, it means that the one and only Charles Leclerc will become world champion for the first time. I'm hoping this comes to fruition because as a Ferrari driver, as a Ferrari fan, and Leclerc as a Ferrari driver, it's so many years of pain without a championship, a constructors or a drivers' championship. But I do see that curse finally coming to an end in 2025.
For me, I've gone the other way around. I've gone for Leclerc in second and Norris in first. I do echo what you said. I do think it will be a very tight battle between McLaren and Ferrari. However, I think I've got to give it to McLaren. I've got to try and take the bias away. I've tried to do that with my driver. So I think Norris has got the edge. He's got the quickest car. And I think if he uses the experience from last season appropriately, it should fuel him for this season, give him a bit of having that taste of what it is like to fight in a championship battle, could help him massively in his racecraft. So that's what I'm hoping to see from Norris this season. That he's used that experience positively. But we'll have to wait and see. I expect McLaren to be the quickest car, which should help him. So that's why I've gone for Lando Norris in first position. So do you want to go through your 1 to 20 and give them out all at the same time?
Just reading them out all 1 to 20. Okay. Wait, you want me to go from top or do you want me to go from 20th upwards?
From first to 20th.
Okay, so 2025 world champion, I've gone with Charles Leclerc. In second place, I've gone with Lando Norris. Max Verstappen to round off the podium places in third. Lewis Hamilton in fourth. Oscar Piastri in fifth. George Russell in sixth. Seventh and eighth, Liam Lawson and Kimi Antonelli. Rounding off the top 10 is Fernando Alonso and Carlos Sainz. In 11th, Lance Stroll. 12th, Pierre Gasly. Alex Albon in 13th. Sonoda 14th. Ocon 15th. Behrman 16th. Isaac Hadjar 17th. Jack Doohan 18th. And the Sauber pair of Nico Hulkenberg and Gabriel Bortoleto in 19th and 20th.
And then for myself, I've got Lando Norris in first, then Leclerc, Hamilton, Oscar Piastri, Max Verstappen, Russell, Lawson, Antonelli, Fernando Alonso, and Carlos Sainz wrapping up the top 10. And then in the bottom half, I've gone Gasly, Ocon, Albon, Stroll, Sonoda, Behrman, Hadjar, Hulkenberg, Doohan, and Bortoleto. Well, thank you all for listening, and we'll definitely provide your 120s as well, see what you agree or disagree with from our rankings. We'll know more in about 8.5 months' time, come Abu Dhabi, and we'll look forward to reviewing these at the end of the season. So thank you all for listening, and goodbye.